Stock Exchange. The first one is to assist the government in achieving the Vision 2030 goals, assist companies to raise capital for retooling, to manage currency risk and the problems of foreign investors in repatriation of their funds from Zimbabwe. Then the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will also seek to partner with a foreign stock exchange or international bank or other investors in order to mitigate the country risk. So those are the reasons why the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange was established. And how is then the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange different from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange? So the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange at the moment is a subsidiary of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, but may seek partnership with other exchanges or international banks. So the relationship with Zimbabwe Stock Exchange may alter with the passage of time. The Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will operate from the Central Business District of Victoria Falls. Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has the United States dollar as the trading and settlement currency. So all the transaction on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will be in United States dollars. Then the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is a separate set of listing requirements from that of ZSE. So the requirements that you investors and listed companies get for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange are different from the ones that they have for Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Then the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is a separate trading board from ZSE, separate members, separate custodians, separate stockbrokers may be admitted to Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Though we have a situation where we can have participants on both exchanges. The Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will also run the clearing and settlement process that is different from the one that is on ZSE. So these are the major differences that we have on between Victoria Falls Stock Exchange and ZSE. I will then go on to the participation on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So the first one is to create your account. So the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has adopted a custodial-based model for clearing and settlement of transaction. So what this means is you have your stockbroker who handles your trading, and you have got a custodian who handle your funds. So there is that segregation of roles between trading and clearing and settlement. The broker handles the trading aspect. The clearing and settlement will be handled by the custodian. This means that all the investors have to open custodial accounts with one of the approved custodians. The custodians have the mandate to create the CSD account number on VFEX on behalf of the clients. At the moment, investors can open their CSD accounts through the following custodians: CAPS Custodial Service, CPZ Custodial Services, FBC Custodial Services, Stanbic Investor Services, and Standard Chartered Custodial Services. So these are the 5 approved custodians, but at this point, we have to note that not all of these custodians have got the same requirements. So some would want more retail clients or the more individual clients. Some deal with bigger corporates. We really don't regulate them. But for individual investors, CPZ Custodial Services and FBC Custodial Services have expressed that they have a product that deals with retail investors. So you can approach any of them, but if you are more on the retail end, then CPZ and FBC may have a product for you. Then the minimum KYC documents. So these are the documents that the custodians would require from you when you are creating your account. So this list is not exhaustive. Your custodians may require more information. So this slide is just for guidance so that you know what is expected when you want to create your CSD account. So for individuals, those above 18 years, you would want your standard ID, which is your passport, driver's license, or your national identification number card. 2 passport size photos, proof of residence. Then for minors, those below 18 years, you also want the birth certificate of the minor and standard IDs of the parent or guardian. Then the 2 passport size photos of the minor, standard IDs of the parent or guardian, and then proof of residence of the parent or guardian. Then in terms of if you are creating an account as a proxy, you need to have a power of attorney, the standard IDs of the proxy, the IDs of the beneficial owner, the proof of passport size photos of the proxy and beneficial owner, as well as the proof of residence of the proxy and the beneficial owner. So these are the types of individual accounts that we offer. Then if it is a company, you're required to produce your certificate of incorporation, the memorandum and articles of association, the CR 14, a board resolution that mandates you to create the custodial account, 2 passport size photos of authorized signatories, as well as the official company documents acceptable in any other jurisdiction. So if you are a company that is coming out from another jurisdiction, maybe say from South Africa or from Mauritius, and they do not have the memorandum and articles of association or certificate of incorporation, they need to produce relevant information documents as a company. Then for trustees, you need your trust deeds, standard IDs of the trustees, 2 passport size photos of trustees, and proof of residence of the trustees. If it's a foundation, we also then require the board resolution of that foundation. Then for societies and investment clubs, churches, the constitution of that society, or a certificate of registration if it's available, then the resolution from the governing body to open the custodial account or the trading account, then 2 passport size photos of the authorized signatories, as well as the proof of residence of the authorized signatories. If it's a corporation incorporated by an act of parliament, you need the board resolution as well as the Relevant Information Act. Then in terms of succession or inheritance, this is key when you have inherited shares and you want to create your account based on that. We need the letter of administration of that estate, as well as the death certificate, standard IDs of the administrator or executors, passport size photos of the administrators or executors, then the proof of residence of the executor. So in terms of standard IDs, these are the requirements: national identity card, valid passport or driver's license, and it has to be certified if it's a copy by a commissioner of odds. Authorization to open and operate the securities account is the resolution that is required for corporate bodies. So if you open this with your custodian and you go to a stockbroker, the stockbroker may have additional documents for him to create an account on your behalf. So you might be required to submit KYC with the stockbroker so that he is also familiar with the person that he's dealing with. So the custodian shall ensure compliance with the requirements of the Money Laundering and Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 9.24, as read with the Anti-Money Laundering and Combating Financing of Terrorism guidelines for the security sector when opening and managing client accounts. So because the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is a United States dollar-based exchange, the issues of money laundering and combating financing of terrorism become key, and the custodians may require additional documentation to satisfy themselves that you are indeed compliant with these regulations. The custodians also shall ensure full disclosure of investors' relevant information, verify the information provided thereof, and then witness the investor signature. So the documents will be filled in the presence of the custodian, and they have to be satisfied that the person they are opening the account for is indeed the owner of that account. Then the shareholders of securities already listed on Victoria, listing on Victoria Falls from Stock Exchange, from Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So as you might know, we have got Citco International that is migrated from Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So these are the shareholders that we would like to address. So investors who already have CSD numbers or custodial accounts based on their investment on Zimbabwe Stock Exchange do not need to open new accounts for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So as an example, shareholders of Citco International will not need to create new accounts, but we have new account numbers allocated to them based on their KYC already submitted to their custodians. So that investor would have had a CSD number for ZSE. He will be allocated the new CSD number for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. The custodian will use the client's details already submitted by the client in their KYC submissions, but may require additional information from the client. Then for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, we will not be operating broker-controlled custodian accounts, which means the stockbrokers that we have cannot perform custodial roles for investors. The custodian function is being done by the registered or approved custodians that I mentioned earlier. This also means that the clients who use broker-controlled custodian accounts will need to be migrated to the approved custodians. So if you are an investor and you already have a broker-controlled custodian account and you would want your securities moved, traded on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, you would need to get in touch with your stockbroker so that he migrates your holdings to a registered custodian. Then we will go to, after creating your account, you would need then to fund your account. Funding your account, an investor on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will need to update their bank details with their custodians to include the Nostro FCA accounts. So because the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is going to be United States dollars, the investors have to have Nostro FCA accounts with their bankers. Then Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will operate on a pre-funding model such that for all buy orders placed in the system, the custodian should have received the funds through properly designated channels and have been cleared for settlement. So what this means is if you want to buy shares, you need to have your money in the account first before that order is executed. And it has to be United States dollars, and the custodian should be able to asset to clear those funds for settlement. In investors' funds, investor funds, their account through transferring funds, either free funds or offshore funds, to their custodian Nostro FCA accounts. The settlement of trades is made by means of delivery of eligible securities coinciding with the payment of funds, which is delivery versus payment. Then for VFX, the DVP model that is going to be employed is DVP model 2, which means the securities will settle on a gross basis, whilst the funds will settle on a multilateral net basis. So what this means is we have 3 types of delivery versus payment models. The first model is DVP model 1, where everyone, where all the trades and the funds settle on a gross basis. So what that means is then the DVP model 2 is what we have adopted, where securities settle on a one trade by trade basis, but the funds are netted off. We have another level, which is DVP model 3, where the securities and the funds are netted off. Then because it's a United States dollars, Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has also worked closely with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe to provide settlements as well as guidelines for the free movement of foreign currency. So to that end, the Reserve Bank issued the Exchange Control Directive, RV 177 of 2020, that deals with exchange control provisions for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So the key provisions from that directive that are key to investors are as follows. The first one is, in order to facilitate the administration of foreign currency inflows and outflows under Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, authorized dealers, which are the banks, are advised that all foreign currency inflows invested into a resident company listed on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange shall be from free funds or offshore funds, and these investment funds shall be credited into the listed corporate's investment FCA account. So the first one is money that is going to come to Victoria Falls Stock Exchange should be defined as free funds and should also be coming from offshore or funds. So for further clarity, if your funds qualify in this category, you can contact your bankers. They will be able to explain that to you fully if you have your funds in the Nostro and they can be classified under these categories. Then the funds held in the FCA investments for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange shall not be subject to any surrender requirements and shall be held for an indefinite period for use by the listed company. So there are no restrictions on funds that would have been invested on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Then the funds held in these FCA accounts may be used to meet both local and foreign requirements without seeking prior exchange control approval. Then the custodians facilitating trade within the VFX may transfer foreign currency pursuant to a trade between the buyer and seller's accounts, FCA accounts. Then the dividends paid out by the companies listed on VFX to resident investors may be paid to their FCA accounts, and that the investors of such income shall not be subject to surrender requirements and may be held for an indefinite period for use to meet local and external payments in line with the exchange control provisions. So if you receive money, either as a dividend from a company listed on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange or you have sold your shares, that money is not subject to any surrender requirements, and you can keep it for an indefinite period. But however, if you are a resident investor, you need to comply with exchange control provisions that your bank would, or that your bank or your account has. Then the foreign currency received by resident investors on VFEX as disinvestment proceeds or dividends into their local FCA accounts shall be eligible for meeting offshore payments as well as settling local obligations. Then for foreigners, dividends and disinvestment proceeds shall be freely remittable through their authorized dealer without seeking prior exchange control approvals. So these are the key provisions that Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has received from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Now we'll go to the, after you've funded, you opened the account, you've funded it, you now need to trade the on the securities that are listed on this Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. So the clients who submit their trade orders through the stockbrokers of their choice. I did mention earlier on, when you go to open a stockbroking account, you might be required to open an account with that stockbroker and provide KYC documentation. The stockbrokers who, upon receipt of the trade orders from the client, verify the availability of the securities in the CSD system or the Central Securities System, which houses all these investments, as well before entering the orders in the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange automated trading system, which is the system or the system that is used to match the orders. Then in the event of a buy order, the stockbroker has to be satisfied that the investor has funded their account with their custodian. So it's also prudent when you as an investor, you put in your order, you need to give them a statement that or a proof of payment to show the stockbroker that you have indeed deposited the money into their account. The stockbrokers shall ensure that all the buy orders placed in the system, the stockbrokers shall ensure that for all the buy orders placed in the system, the custodian has received the funds through the properly designated channels and have been cleared for settlement. The trades will be matched on the VFEX automated trading platform and will be communicated to the custodian in real time. So as the trading is happening on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, the custodians will have a real-time view of what's the activity on their client accounts. Then the custodians will then also confirm with you as an investor if you indeed execute the trade, and this is done on the day of execution of that trade. Then the trading times. So Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will have different sets of trading times from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. The day starts at 9 o'clock with the pre-open session between 9 o'clock and 9:30. Then from 9:30 to 11, we have got your open session or the continuous trading session. That continuous trading session ends at 11, and we enter into the post-close trading session that runs from 11 to 3:30 p.m. And at 3:30 p.m. the market closes. So this is the trading timetable for Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. The cost of trading. So the levies and fees and charges applicable to Victoria Falls Stock Exchange are provided for in Statutory Instrument 246 of 2020, and this is the schedule. So the schedule is also different from what we have on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. The broker's commission is 0.6%. VAT is 14.5% of VAT of the broker's commission. So 14.5% of the broker's commission is VAT. The CSD levy is 0.04%. The stamp duty is 0.25% on the buying deals only, and nothing on the sale deals. The VFEX levy is 0.15% of the trade deal. The Securities and Exchange Commission levy is 0.05% of the trade deal. Then the Investor Protection Fund levy is 0.01%. So the total cost on the buy side is 1.1870%, and the total cost on the sell side is 0.9370%. So the costs are significantly lower than what is prevailing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. And you also might have noticed that on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, we have a 1% withholding tax on the sale proceeds, which is not there on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. The total cost for buying and selling will be 2.12% on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Then we'll go on after the trading. You then go to the clearing and settlement aspect of the trades. What happens between your trade being executed and you receive your funds in your bank account. So this is the process that we define as clearing and settlement. So the settlement cycle that we have adopted is T+3, which means trade date plus 3 business days. So as an example, a trade executed on a Monday will settle 3 business days later, that is on a Thursday. The settlement of all trades will be done through a simultaneous, final, and irrevocable delivery versus payment, which links the movement of securities to the movement of to the payment. So once the payment has been received by the seller will then release the securities to the buyer. This reduces settlement risk for the market participants and investors, as it guarantees that investors will not make payments and fail to get delivery of their shares bought, or deliver shares sold and fail to receive payment. So that's why we have employed the delivery versus payment mechanism. So on the trade date, that's T+0, the custodians will have up to 3 o'clock to accept or reject trades executed on the account of their clients. Any trade so rejected shall be deemed, any trade not so rejected shall be deemed accepted by T+0 1530, and the VFEX depository shall send notifications to the affected stockbrokers by 1500 hours on the trade date. On T+1, all funds, all net funds payment obligation arising from the settlement, arising on the settlement date are effected and settled through the custodian bank of each participant at 9:30 hours at the central, at the Reserve Bank, by debiting and crediting their respective bank accounts on the net positions for each custodian as a result of settlement. Then on T+3, because foreign currency transaction occur on a T+2 basis, we expect that if a transfer is made on T+1, the receiving client gets the funds on T+3. So once the confirmation has been received from RBZ that the payment has been sent to each of the offshore correspondent banks of the receiving custodians, the VFEX depository will then transfer the securities. And so at that point, the settlement cycle is complete, and the seller will then release the securities after receiving the cash. Still on clearing and settlement, upon settlement of a trade, the transferor's securities account is debited with the eligible securities being the object of the trade, and the participant's funds account is credited to the with the correspondent payment. So upon the completion of the settlement cycle, the trade is final and irrevocable and cannot be unwound. So what that means is, if you have sold your shares, you cannot reverse the process. If you have bought shares, you cannot reverse that process. So we cannot cancel trades or amend trades post-settlement. Then the custodians are not permitted to attach any condition or restrictions on the settlement of trades, and such conditions and restrictions that are imposed contrary to our rules and procedures are not going to be effective. So custodians cannot give other conditions or detail things that are contrary to what I've discussed before. Then, so once settlement is done, we also have got in other issues that we refer to as private transactions. These are transactions that are not concluded on the exchange, but may result in the movement of securities between investors' accounts. So these are, we refer them to as transfers. So the change of ownership of securities on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is through duly concluded trades on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, except in the following circumstances. So what that means is, if you're an investor and you have bought shares on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, there is no other way that the shares can be transferred to another participant, to another investor, or to another account holder, unless they have been traded on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. However, there is the exception, and it is in the following instances. In terms of hereditary transfers, inheritances, succession, as I mentioned earlier, and the shares have already been put on the depository, we can change the ownership, but the one requesting the transfer should produce a letter of administration from the courts, as well as all the relevant documentation. Then in terms of donations, if securities have been donated to another investor, they can be transferred without trading, but whoever is facilitating that is to provide the necessary tax approvals in that. Gifts will also fall in the same category, but they have to be subject to the necessary tax approvals. Then there are other dispositions of eligible securities with prior regulatory approvals. So if there is a regulatory instruction or there's been a directive to do so, we can transfer shares. So this minimizes also the risk that your securities will be stolen or will move to the wrong hands. Then for investors investing on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, there are now a number of incentives for them. So the first one is going to trade exclusive in the United States is trading in and settlement. Capital raised by a company listed on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange may be held in an approved local or offshore account with an internationally recognized banking institution. Allowance to use offshore settlement for trades done. So the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange has been permitted to look for an offshore banking partner that will handle the settlement aspect. Then investors on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange will also be exempt from paying tax on their capital gains. Then the funds held in the FCI investments for investors shall not be subject to any surrender requirements and shall be held for an indefinite period for use by the investor or the listed company. Then the withholding tax on dividends will be 5%, which is lower than the 10% on Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. Then the income from dividends paid out on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange to resident investors shall not be subject to surrender requirements and may be held for an indefinite period for use to meet local and external payments in line with exchange control approvals. Then dividends and disinvestments due to non-resident investors shall be freely remitted to both without seeking prior exchange control approvals. So at this juncture, I will then open up the floor for questions so that we can interact and get your questions as well as comments regarding investing on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange.
Yeah, I think the first one, obviously, most guys, I think, requested that we share the presentation, and we will share the presentation to every one of us who is on this platform. There was also a comment regarding the minimum amounts, and we had indicated that okay, the minimum is 100, but the custodians are going to specify different minimum requirements on the basis of the clientele which they want to attract. So it's going to differ from one custodian to the next custodian. Again, the transaction costs, Tsonki had also indicated that what are the costs by the custodians. Again, they are going to differ from one custodian to the next, but the few that we know, they will charge between 0.01 to 0.05 of the purchases value of those shares on the market or sales on the market. So you can also raise your hand so that we can, you can, if you want to speak, if you don't want to type, you can also raise your hand.
Okay, there's another question from Ben Manika. For an investor, for an individual investing from outside Zim, how difficult is the procedure to take the money offshore as well? So the process is not going to be difficult as long as if you've got your custodial account. There is no need to seek prior exchange control approval when you want to take your money offshore. So you can just make your request to your bankers and they'll process the TT to an offshore source. So that's not going to be a big hurdle if you are investing outside Zimbabwe. Then there's another one, which companies are listed on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange? At the moment, we have got Citco International listed. So there is one counter listed in Citco International. But we do expect other companies to come on board. The other one, when can individuals start to participate? The exchange has been opened and everyone is now free to participate on Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. Then there's another one, which stocks are likely to be listed in the next 6 months. At the moment, there's Citco International. There are also companies that were suspended on Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, which is PPC and Old Mutual. We expect them to come to Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, but we don't have the timelines when this is going there, when the listing is going to be finalized. So I think these are.
But maybe I can also add in with regard to sometimes firms who only want their information to be really out in the public when they are at a stage where they are about to put out a circular to the market that they are actually going to list on the market. So in as much as we may have the pipeline, but it's difficult to share given that some of the discussions are held on a confidential basis. So are there any other questions from the floor? There's one which is saying, is there an arrangement to trade on VFEX online? Yes, what we are working on, it's currently online because you can literally ask the broker to put your trades from anywhere else across. But what we are going to be working on is a similar model, which is on the ZSC, where we are going to have a retail platform, which is the ZSC Direct, where you can access this service online and should be able to purchase your shares online or sell your shares online using that app. But we are currently in the process of developing or working together or working on a platform on the payment gateways, especially for people who are going to be using the Visa or the MasterCards. So we are trying to look at how we can incorporate those. For us, it's going to be where value is going to be obtained on the VFX, especially for people in the diaspora and the people who are holding Master or Visa cards. So there's something which is being worked on so that we can have a retail app where people can trade on by themselves without really much from intervention from a broker's perspective. So there's another one way from Wadzanai. Wadzanai is saying the government changes accounts willy-nilly from USD to RTG to ZWL to FCA. What happens to US dollar in the account when the government does that? Okay. What we have worked on with the Reserve Bank, you have seen the Exchange Control Directive, which came out a while ago, which really specifies the conditions attached to the FCA investments for people who have specifically invested on VFEX. And over and above that, we have also signed service level agreements where RBZ is agreeing to be the settlement partner and ensure that the movement of money is going to take place. Over and above that, we are also going to set an oversight committee, which is going to look at settlement issues on a frequent basis to see whether there are any bottlenecks which are in the system, which helps us to be in a position to understand where we are in terms of settlement. So we believe with those safeguards, we will be in a position to at least understand the position. And if it's no longer attainable, I think it then calls for action. But what I just wanted to reiterate is we have received enormous government support to help us to be in a position to get where we are now. And given that there's that in government support, we don't believe that the government through RBZ will not be in a position to follow its commitment. I think for us, we see this support is something which is very positive, and we are yes, we cannot guarantee 100%, but we are confident that the process that we have gone so far indicates that these obligations are going to be met, as long as the money is sitting in the correct account. That is our firm belief. Then Kudzai said, I missed the part of the presentation. Are all trades being done via brokers only, no ZSE direct? Currently, yes, they have to go through the brokers, but we are working on us so that we will be in a position to incorporate the payment gateways for people then to be in a position to trade through the ZSE direct. Lamau is saying, sorry, I joined the webinar late. Will it be possible to use my local Nostro account to purchase equity securities on the VFEX? Yes, you have to approach your bank and they will be in a position to determine whether that funds sitting in your accounts are free funds and they are transferable to a custodian so that they can be used for that investment purposes. So you may approach your custodian and say, or your bank and say, I want to transact on this, so can I make my transfer? They then give you an indication. But for investment purposes, they've indicated that the investment, FCA investments is the account that people are going to use, and they've then given conditions which are attached to that account. One of which is to say these accounts don't have a liquidation period. They're not also subject to the surrender requirements. So you can approach your bank for that. Then I think what Zana is saying, how do we open a trading account? I think Tash indicated the process, but we'll share so that you'll be in a position to see how you open your trading account. We'll share the presentation. It is actually detailing the process, and you can, if you have any further comments or questions from there, we can then take it up. We are all available to give further clarifications and guidance should you require further guidance when you have got sight of the presentation. Then Ayanda is saying that's a point of concern that what happens to the Forex invested in accounts are changed. That's why our firm belief is that we are not going to have a shifting of positions in terms of the accounts. So we will be in a position to get back to you, and I'm saying you should be in a position to get back to your bank, and they will be in a position to give you an actual position. We don't believe, given the commitment that is there, we don't believe there's going to be really changing of FCA accounts.
Okay, there is another one, maybe to deal with, I think Benika, the greatest fear for me personally on investing in Zimbabwe was the shift in currency in use. Just share the assurance we have on VFX. So for VFX, because it's going to be largely secondary market trading, so we have to ensure that the buyer has brought the foreign currency to buy either as free funds or offshore funds. And those are the funds that we are going to move to the seller. So if we keep that ecosystem as is, there is not going to be any contamination with other currencies in the system. So we are going to insist, and the bankers know that that has to be the position. The funds that are being invested should be able to move offshore, either as offshore funds or as free funds. So there is that, we have that level of comfort because we know where the money is coming from. and we can direct where the money is going. Then there's why
But you just, sorry, before you go, Tinashe, just to add, I think the structured instrument that we have specifically outlines that trading in this market is in US dollars. So for us, that's a clear indication that there won't be contamination. And what we've just been trying to indicate to the market that this is the position. We still believe that with the level of support and where these guys want to be, we are in a position where we can say we are comfortable in terms of the arrangements which are there in terms of movement of money and whether the money are proper USD or not.
Then the other one is why have we excluded the broker custodial model, which reduces cost. So for brokers, we understand the model reduces cost, but there were a lot of KYC shortfalls in that system. So we wanted to ensure that whoever handles, that was the first issue. The second issue was stockbrokers were not going to be able to open settlement accounts at the Reserve Bank. They also needed to appoint a bank to work with them. So that added another layer, but that bank would not have control of the KYC collection by the stockbrokers. So we have tried to deal with the KYC issue by making sure that the bank that does the settlement on the Reserve Bank, at the Reserve Bank platform, is the one that has satisfied itself that they have collected the necessary KYC from the client. But we are also working with the custodians so that they reduce the the fees that they charge to the retail investors that are being handled by the stockbrokers. So we believe that we are going to have a win-win situation where the custodians are going to reduce their clients, the fees to the retail clients that we have on VFX.
Hello? Can you hear me? I think when I was talking, I thought mostly, I'm not sure whether I was audible to everyone. Can anyone hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay. So we're saying in terms of there was a comment regarding not mentioning names, how many ZSC companies have expressed interest in listing 20%. So the first part is that we have the 3 companies which the remaining 2 companies which were suspended. We are really hopeful that they are going to list on VFEX. They are obviously at different stages in terms of the concessions which they are seeking from a ministry perspective and from an RBZ perspective. But we're confident that those 2 are going to come on board. But I also indicated that we are confident that there is another one which is likely to come probably before end of this year or first quarter next year. So, and there's a pipeline where we have inquiries which are coming time and again. But again, I think we also need to understand that the listing process itself takes a bit more time. You're looking at probably 6 to 9 months for the process to list. So with the level of interest that we currently have, we are expecting that maybe by end of year we'll have, end of next year we'll have probably about five listings. So the second part, is obviously the companies listing 20% on VFEX. So for those companies that want to migrate their listing, say, and raise an additional 20% from ZSC to VFEX, so far I'm not in the issuer department, but we have not had someone who wants to have a different class of securities, who wants to come on the VFX as it stands. Then Fungai has indicated that besides stocks, are you planning on introducing any other product on the VFX? If so, what is the timeline for those? Okay. VFX is still open to every other product which is contained in the statutory instrument. But we also have to appreciate that these products, sometimes they are driven by fund managers, they're driven by issuers, and we are expecting that people would see value and then start to issue products like ETF. But to say we have timeline in terms of how many are coming, it's premature at this stage. So there is another question here from Kuzish. I think K. Sharara is saying how many shareholders have transferred their Sidco shares to the VFX CSD from the CDC, from Chingetedzai. Okay. What we are sure of is because VFX is going to be using its own depository, the migration has already taken place. What is just left is for people to access their new account numbers, which are generated through the VFX depository, and they can then be in a position to immediately trading. But remember, there is one part where there are those clients who were having broker administered accounts and still holding Sidco shares. What they then need to do is to approach their broker. The broker should have had negotiations and recommend which custodian they may want to go to. So the broker is, in this instance, is going just to make a recommendation to say, based on cost, we believe the custodian giving competitive cost is custodian 1, 2, 3. So they have to make that initiative so that they can then choose the custodian who they want to hold securities on their behalf. So in terms of numbers, we are saying everyone else who was on Chegeted Dai Depository has been moved to VFX Depository. Wazana is come back again. For those outside Zimbabwe, I heard you talking about parcel sizes. How do I submit? You did not get an answer because there was no voice for a few minutes. Okay, maybe it was. But what we said is, if you already have an account on the CSD, and we are sure that the your KYC is being held somewhere. When you are opening an account or when you're transferring, it's a question of just taking those KYC documents and then resubmit them to open a new CSD account on VFEX. I'm not sure whether then that addresses your concern. So I think that's what we had for today. I'm not sure whether there are any further comments or clarifications. Should there be anything, I think we'll be available to answer any comments or questions that you may have. Any of the team, the VFX team members who are here will be in a position to respond to any queries. Maybe I'll take the last comment, which has come from Lemio. It's saying, you say the listing process is to take 6 to 9 months. Can that process be speeded up? Otherwise, it would take months, if not years, for VFX to have significant number of listings. Okay, I think they are, for me, I think you also need to understand from our point of view, our approval process will take less than a month if one wants to come on the VFEX. But there are some statutory requirements which one contained in the Companies Act. Secondly, there are internal processes and approvals which you require. We'll say, for starters, if a company wants to raise capital, they have to come up with a business plan. And this business plan has to be approved by their board, and if it is approved their board, they then approach their shareholders to say, we have this proposal, in this proposal we want to raise money for this, and they have to take that to the shareholders. So if you look at the requirements, the time lag which is required for you to say hold an EGM or an AGM, you are looking at a minimum of 21 days according to the Companies Act. So already you know that that's a month. There are internal approvals. We don't know how fast or how rigid that process, that internal process is. When you do that, you also have to publish circulars where people are going to be given an opportunity to subscribe if it's supposed to be an IPO. So all that time leads to a process where we are saying it takes about, on average, it takes about 6 to probably 9 months. But if those things are quicker, you are only looking at the requirement, which is basically your statutory requirements in terms of notice to shareholders, which is your 21 days and the other 21 days for your subscription. So effectively, from a ZSE or from a listing rules perspective, we are looking at about 2 months. So, but the rest rests with the internal approvals and processes within the firm. So I conservatively put it at 6 to 9 months, knowing how these processes you normally take. But okay, from our perspective, in terms of approval, this process can take 3 months in terms of approvals, looking at the regulatory requirements. So, Keith, I think you'll be the last one who will take the last comment. Just as a follow-up on Lamio's question, so how do you have an estimate of companies that have already begun the listing process, or Citco International is the only one? Okay, remember, we are in discussions. What we said prior was that the listing process, obviously, there are engagements which are taking place between us and potential issuers. So those engagements give us an indication to say we are engaging 1, 2, 3, 4 issuers at the moment. So that gives us a bit of confidence in terms of us saying, we believe by end of this month, because the inquiries, you can then see whether the inquiry is just an inquiry or it is a serious inquiry. So from that, you have an estimate in terms of, okay, this is where they are. Because you're engaging, you also know the stages which they are when they looking at their internal processes and the regulatory perspective. So that is why we gave that indication. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for taking time to participate. We value your feedback. If there's anything that you want us to continue to look at, we are open and our emails are available, and we can share any other information that you want us to share. But otherwise, from a VFX or ZSC perspective, we want to thank you so much for taking time to be with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.